Fourth player, Will Setterfield. Now, I think it was a unanimous consensus at the end of 2020 that he was probably our most improved player, and then he really fell for cliff in 2021. I'm not sure whether that was a coaching issue or whether that was a motivation issue or whether something like extenuating circumstances, but he just didn't find. I think with most players on this list, he had a lot of like most players on this list have had their highs, and then they just haven't been able to maintain it.
Yeah, well, we just spoke about Lockie O'Brien, and how he had his low lows and then his high highs, and I think that's exemplified in Will Setterfield perfectly again. I mean, we've seen him in 2020, and we're saying that he's the next Cuda for our team. We're getting really hyped about him because he's a big body in that midfield who can use the ball well. And even something that I realised in that Melbourne game when he was going forward in 2020, if you guys recall, he played fantastically up there. He was kicking in goals in that last quarter when we were marching on that comeback, and literally the world was his oyster in 2021. I mean, he pretty much locked down a spot in that midfield. He was unlucky to not get a rising star knob, and I think that this year he needs to get back to that kind of form. He needs to get back to that ground game, that basics, just tackling hard, being a presence, and accumulating the footy, because there's a lot of competition in that midfield. There's a lot of young guys fighting for their spot, and he's right up there with one of them who needs to have a massive year to keep his spot.
Yeah, I think he's been a little bit unlucky, especially now with Hewitt and Chera coming in, because I don't think he's, unless he has an outstanding preseason, which only the club will really know the full details of it. But I don't think he starts round one, which is unfortunate because he needs to. Like, he needs to start the season well, and then really kick on. Like you said, with him going forward, he has multiple strings to his bow. He is that like 8 to 10 tackles a game, 20 to 20 touches, but he can go forward. He's got that big body, and he was in 2020. He was that help that Cripps needed. He was that like just second, almost a forward in the midfield, pretty much with his size and his explosiveness. Yes, there are weaknesses to his game. He potentially doesn't have the pace or the like distribution that someone like a Walsh or a Charo does. But I think I'll come back to this again. I do think he was left out to dry by David Teague a little bit, playing on the wing. I'm not sure if Voss is going to continue with that. Apparently, that he's been floating on the wing in a couple of match sims. I'm not sure if that's reliable or if that's just I've made that up. But I think his best position is in that midfield and staying there and going forward if we need to, or if like someone's injured, because he doesn't have the tank to play on the wing, but he has that big body to play in the midfield.
Yeah, and I think someone that's got to be his benchmark is a Matt Kennedy. I think that him and Matt Kennedy are directly comparable. I mean, Matt Kennedy is that big body that helped to Cripps, and he performed last year. He took Will Setterfield's spot in that midfield.
Yeah.
Will Setterfield could have taken that from Kennedy, but he didn't with his performances. I mean, Kennedy was that reliable mark going down from defense, and he was that big body to get the ball and get it out while also going forward and making an impact. Everything that Will Setterfield prides his game on. So if he's got a benchmark in front of him, because I think Matt Kennedy will start round one, and if he can catch up to him and overlap him, that's what we need. And we're at a luxurious time in our lifespan in the last years as Carlton fans, because we've got that competition. I mean, 4 years ago, Will Setterfield starts in our team comfortably, really. I mean, no one's taking his spot. But at this point, there's a George Hewitt and there's, like I said, a Matt Kennedy who does exactly what he does, but better at this point. So he's got someone to look at training every single time he goes and says, I need to be better than this person if I want to keep my list, if I want to keep my spot on this list. And if he doesn't, then he's just going to be cut. It's that simple. We haven't got the luxury of keeping players on the list and being deadwood. He fell into that category last year. He was kind of a player that we didn't miss. We didn't realize his absence, and that's something that's not good because he plays a very important role in the team. We've spoken about players like Paddy Down and Lockie O'Brien who are a bit of the cherry on top, but that's not what players like Matt Kennedy and Will Setterfield are. They are instrumental to our midfield if we are playing good footy, because we need that push-up, we need that tackling, and if he's not living up to those expectations, he hasn't got a spot on the list. So, again, it's a massive, massive year for Will Setterfield. He's got the world to prove, and we know he can do it because we've seen it before. Yeah. But, it's all up to him now.
I think, like you said with Kennedy, I think Hewitt and Curnow fall in that in that bracket as well. I think there's them four midfielders are absolutely crucial, but they're unassuming cult heroes almost because like we've seen Ed Kerno has been that 7 out of 10 minimum player for near on a decade, right? Obviously, it's hard to replicate that because even though he's not flashy, players like Ed Kerno are one in a like they're once in a life, not once in a lifetime, but they're very rare to come across those players who are willing to do that for the team, especially in a team that's been underperforming. But Setterfield, Kennedy, and Hewitt, I think Hewitt and Kennedy are just that rung above him, and Setterfield has precedent that he can look to. He can look to his form in 2020, and just like he can look to Kennedy now and think, all right, what can I do to get back there? What can I take from Kennedy or what can I take from Hewitt to get back there? And for me, his best case scenario is he could quite easily come into the team within the first 2 months of the season, maybe by the bye. If he's in the team by the bye, I think he can. That will show to the coaching staff that he's the real deal. He's back and he will play for the rest of the season if he can break in and break in early. Because the more the likes of Hewitt, Kennedy, Chera get continuity in that midfield, the less likely the less likely he's gonna play. Because
Yes.
especially for playing well, Voss isn't going to fix a system that's broken.
Yeah, and Matt Kennedy was undroppable towards the end of
Yeah.
last season. He really was because he was playing his role to perfection. I mean, we saw that GWS game where no one had any tackles to halftime. Like 11 or 12 of us had no tackles, Carlton players, but Matt Kennedy had. He had 4 or 5 that game, which was showing that he was a step above the other players when it comes to effort. And I think that's because he was playing for his career. And I don't want to make this a Matt Kennedy video, but that's directly comparable again to Will Setterfield. Because he is that player that we need to look at that is providing that pressure. That's his main role. Like you've said in the past, he's not a reliable kick. He's not a player that's going to accumulate the footy as that reliable kick towards forward 50. He's that player who gets on the ground, handballs it out to an outside player, or he's that player that's tackling heaps. And unless he can do it better than the likes of Ed Kerno and Matt Kennedy, he's not going to get a spot on the list. But I entirely agree with you when you say that if he can find his spot in the team, he's got that form in 2020 where he was also undroppable.
Yeah.
So if he can find that again, he's got a spot on this list. But yeah, it's like I've said, for every player in this series, it's all up to them. The world is their oyster for the next 12 months, and they've got everything to prove.
Yeah, it's almost as if because we just did the Lockie O'Brien video, and it was almost like a direct comparison with Paddy Bell. Just like it's for Setterfield, it's a direct comparison for Kennedy. And O'Brien was lucky he kept his spot. I don't think Voss has different expectations, has different standards. Will Setterfield needs to be because he's had time in the system. Like he's had time at 2 different clubs. He's really settled into the AFL system now. There's no excuses of him acclimatizing or anything like that. He's proven that he's good enough. He's also proven that he can be not good at some stages. It's make or break for Will Setterfield in 2022. There are our thoughts on Will Setterfield and his 2022 season. Let us know yours in the comments below.